Good afternoon for those that were brave enough to stay on Juliet's room and took the risk of listening to us as forest lovers. We have the privilege to open the Tecnicelpa seminar on this respect of these conferences, and we have 3 presentations for this afternoon. And I would say that in my perspective that will be we have a link between the 3 of them that will affect a little bit the uncertainty upon the future with climate change. They will reflect upon various aspects of forestry and discussing upon risks. We have this uncertainty, and of course there will be risks associated with it. I don't want to anticipate nothing. Let's wait for the presentations. But I will welcome you for questions after the 3 presentations. So we'll start with Raul Monteiro. I have to read, sorry for that. But Raul has a bachelor's degree in geography and he has a master's in geomatics. He works in Raiz, and since 2018 he's been working as a research technician and as well as a consultant within Raiz Forest and Paper Research Institute. He's involved in different activities, mainly in climate modeling, geographic information systems, and technology transfer to forestry associations and certification groups. So I welcome Raul to join to make his presentation on impact of climate changes on eucalyptus productivity in Portugal in the last 20 years.
Muito boa tarde. Today I'll talk about climate change. The subject is having been widely discussed nowadays at Raiz Institute. Many studies have been conducted to understand the global warming impacts and to develop solutions to mitigate them. So this specific study assessed the impact of climate change on eucalypt productivity in Portugal. It was conducted by Nuno Rodrigues, Daniela Ferreira, and I. Well, climate change basically is a change in climate which is attributed or not to human activity and which is in addition to natural climate variability. So I brought this chart because it illustrates this concept and the whole thing that we have been witnessing in the last decades. Here in this chart you can see the global mean temperature anomalies with respect to the pre-industrial conditions. So we can see here that until the 1940s we have this fluctuation around 0 degrees. That means just this natural climate variability, and at the starting point we have this warming trend that starts and persists until 2022. I have also to say that the World Meteorological Organization classified this last 8 years as the warmest recorded in history. So this situation and impacting the climate in Portugal, the last climate report from IPMA, the Portuguese Institute for Sea and Atmosphere, shows that last year we have extreme events related to precipitation and temperature, and this chart shows that this has been happening in the last years. Here, every year since 1941 is classified with respect to its temperature and precipitation anomalies. And the years from 2000 onwards are marked in yellow. So we can see that almost all of the years were classified as warm, and most of them was classified as well as dry. So this indicates that the climatic conditions in Portugal are decreasing, And given this context, this study aimed to evaluate the impact of climate change over the past decades on the productivity of eucalyptus forests in Portugal. We defined two specific goals. The first one was to analyze the annual evaluation of climate potential for globulus, and the second one was to evaluate the expected productivity variation of eucalyptus forests in the last 23 years. So to answer these goals, we used two decision support tools developed by Raiz Institute that are the climate potential map and this concept of productivity regions for globulus. This concept is an estimation model for eucalyptus globulus that consists of the combination of the climate and the soil potentials. Those potentials stratifies the territory into 11 classes, where the 0-1 means no suitability for eucalyptus. The class 1 means the lowest condition, while the class 10 means the highest climate condition for eucalyptus. The climate potential is based on the precipitation and temperature requirements for the development of eucalyptus, while the soil potential is based on the ability of each soil to storage water and provide nutrients to the plants. So, let me try this. Okay. So combining these two informations, as a result, we have the productivity regions for Portugal. We defined 8 productivity regions, each one with its own productivity estimate. And the important here is to understand that the expected mean annual increments increase with the combination of higher soil and climate potential classes. So for example, we have the lowest estimates with the productivity region class 8, and we have the higher ones with the productivity region class 1. So we used this methodology to carry out this study that consisted of creating annual climatic potential maps to evaluate their behavior along the last 23 years. So it allowed us to estimate the productivity in different times along the last years. We concentrated our study over the Portuguese eucalyptus forests. So the data we used for the Portuguese eucalyptus forests, we used the land cover map provided by DGT. The climate potential map is based on the climatological normals for the period between 1971 to 2000. That's our reference period, and that information is provided by IPMA. The soil potential map is based on the national soil map, combined with some other maps with a better resolution, a better information. And finally, for the annual climate potential maps, we used the monthly data provided by the Climate Monitoring Service from IPMA to Navigator Company and beyond. So here we have the first results. They are the anomalies, the climatic anomalies that occurred with the precipitation and temperature variables that we used to create the climate potential. So we can see here, these gray lines represent the expected values for each variable in relation with the climatological normals. So you can see in relation to the precipitation variables that the values are below the expected in the last 23 years. And in relation to the temperature variables, you can see that the mean annual temperature is increasing in the last years. And we also had some extreme events related to minimum and maximum temperature. Those anomalies, they impacted all the maps that we created and also impacted the map with the average climate potential for the whole period that we studied from 2000 to 2022. So we intersected all these maps with the area of the Portuguese eucalyptus forest, and here we have the results. We have here, each bar is the forest area classified in relation to the climate potential for each year. We can see that part of the forest did not meet the minimum climatic requirements for the globus, especially from 2015 onwards. We also can see that the average climate potential has dropped between the two reference periods. We used to have the higher climate potential class prevailing in the reference period, and over the last 23 years, we have the lower class prevailing. So we gathered all this information and used it to feed the productivity region model to estimate the productivity in these two time points. So here we have, in those maps, the results of the average productivity of the national eucalyptus forests using, in this side, the climatic potentials for the reference period between 1971 to 2000. And this productivity is based on the first rotation, seminal E globus estimates, so used to have a average productivity around 10 cubic meters hectare a year, and we can see that it dropped to 8.9 cubic meters when we used the climate information for the last 23 years. It means a decrease of 11% in the estimated productivity between these evaluated periods. And after that, we decided to intersect both maps so we could analyze spatially all over the territory the variation of the productivity. So here we have in this graphic this result. First, the proportional area for each class of productivity region on each time point. And also, we have how was the variation of the productivity. So we can have this kind of analysis that we can assess the magnitude of each variation in the forest. So we have the areas that was classified as a class 4, productivity region class 4, and it continued as a class 4 along the time. We have in some cases areas that was a class 4 and became a class 5. It indicates some downgrade in the climatic potential. When this downgrade was stronger, we have this class 4 dropping to a class 6, and so on. So the important here is to understand that over the country had different levels of impact on production depending where it occurred. So understanding this magnitude, we can target the best efforts for each impact. The conclusions of the study was that over the past 2 decades, this impact on climatic potential has resulted in an 11% decrease of the mean annual increment. We can see these anomalies in the climate potential in the last 23 years. We also concluded that analyzing this historical climate evolution allows the identification of the priority areas for mitigating the effects of climate change on the Portuguese forest. Some of these mitigation actions are silvicultural practices in response to climate change, and the choice depends on this magnitude that I said. So some of them are the adjustments in the plant density, minimum land preparation for planting, different weed control techniques. We can also use more resilient genetic materials. Some clones, eucalyptus clones and hybrids are showing some productivity gains around 20-25% when compared to the seminal material. And we also can do close path monitoring. Lately we have been monitoring some climate-related variables and vegetation indices to predict the pests outbreaks and trying to anticipate the attacks to minimize their impacts. So, these are some of the actions that can mitigate climate change, and as we saw, relating this climate evolution with the variations in the productivity can support an efficient decision-making in management. Thanks, that's all.
Thank you very much, Raul. I believe that you provided already some fuel for discussion later on.
Thank you.
We will move on. We will pass to Daniela. Daniela Ferreira. She's a researcher at RAIZ also since 2001. And she's been working for many years with soil and plant nutrition of eucalyptus. She has a master in forestry engineer by the University of Trás-os-Montes, and she's working on studying chemical and biological sciences on for her PhD. She studied nitrogen availability in forest soils. That was the master thesis in the past, I believe. And in RAIZ, Daniela is now heading the team of research and development of genetics, improvement, and forestry consulting. So welcome, Daniela, presentation on soil fertility and carbon storage and the eucalyptus stands in Portugal. Thank you, Daniela.
Boa tarde, good afternoon. So we will talk about soil fertility and carbon storage and the eucalyptus stands in Portugal. Okay, so knowledge on soil fertility and plant nutrient requirements are important to establish a good fertilization plan for eucalyptus in Portugal. We know that eucalyptus responds very well to fertilization, which means that soil not always has the nutrients that the plants need. We have an average of 32% of wood gains in maintenance phase, which is in ages of 2 to 6 years old. So it is important to evaluate soil and correct plants' needs, and also consider that we have to look at soil as an essential resource, and that we want to maintain its capacity to keep on allowing that plants will grow in the future, not only looking at the production that we want to have now, but at the future, independently if we want to have eucalypt in the future in some land, or we want to have another species. So we have to protect the soil, not only to our benefits today, but in the future. So in this study in particular, we had the main goal to compile information from our database. RAIZ has a database that has information from our research and also another monitoring that Navigator does. And we have more than 20 years of information, so we compile that information in an environment, in a GIS environment. And we compared with some reference data. And we also wanted to have a map with carbon storage that is important today. It's a main subject actually. So we wanted to have a map so the company could use and benefit from it. So the database has almost 2,500 samples. They are all scattered out through the country, as you can see in this map on the right. We have eucalyptus or have stands in very many regions of the country. So we have a lot of data from different regions in the country. We considered the parameters in this analysis: pH in water, organic matter, extractable phosphorus, and exchangeable bases. The number of samples varied a little bit between the parameters, so we didn't restrict it that the samples had to have all the parameters that we considered. So in the first line in the top table you can see that we have almost 2,000 samples for pH and almost 2,500 for calcium. We have some variation in the magnitude of values that we have between the parameters. Calcium varies more in its values along the country. So after we migrated the information to GIS, we compared it with some reference levels that we already have created in the past. So we could create a gradient of sampling in the country. So regarding results, eucalypt is sensitive to alkaline soils, so we don't have very much samples. We almost don't have samples from alkaline or neutral soils. So mainly it is adapted to some acidity in the soil, and we can see we have values varying between 4 and 6.5. We had a good relationship between precipitation and organic matter and exchangeable calcium with pH in the soil. So where we have more precipitation, we have lower levels of pH. The same happens to organic matter, and then we have a direct relationship with an increase of pH and calcium levels. Regarding nitrogen, nitrogen is one of the main nutrients that we apply in fertilization for eucalypts. It responds very well, and it means that the soils, the forestry soils, don't have very much of this nutrient, at least for one stage of growing of eucalypt in the initial phase, until 6 years old. So we can see that we have some differences, and the north of the country is more rich in nitrogen, but we have more than 50% of the samples with low levels of nitrogen. So it corroborates the fact that we have to use fertilization with nitrogen. And we also have a good relation with climate. It is expected because nitrogen comes from decomposition of organic matter, so organic matter decomposition depends on precipitation and temperature, so it is natural to have this relationship between these climate variables and nitrogen availability. So the south is poor, the south and the interior of the country is poor in nitrogen. Phosphorus is also a nutrient that is limiting for eucalyptus growth, essentially at the beginning when we do planting. Forestry soils are also not very rich in phosphorus. Almost all samples have low level, very low level. We already knew that. This analysis just shows us in a graphic way that this is really occurring, and we didn't find any relationship with the climatic parameters. So regarding potassium and calcium, we only have some site-specific response. We already know that we can find a good relationship for calcium with some regions in the country, but not for potassium. We can see here that the samples with very low and low levels are spread throughout the country. So it is important to keep on monitoring soil and keep on gaining knowledge to know where to apply potassium and not apply potassium. If you can see now that calcium, we have lower levels in the north and center of the country and higher levels with the south, in the south of the country. Magnesium is an element that exists in abundance in forest soils, so we don't have any need to apply this nutrient. And we can see we have very low, 10% of samples that have low levels of magnesium. Regarding carbon. We have the same distribution for carbon that we have for nitrogen. So we have more available carbon in soils in the north of the country and less and lower levels in the south and the interior, where the climate improves in the south, mainly Monchique Serra de Monchique is a good example. Where the climate improves, carbon also improves because we have also higher levels of organic matter. Eucalypt has the ability to improve organic matter in the soil. It has a high rate of growth. With leaf fall, it decomposes and creates some part of it transforms into organic matter to the soil. We had 16 trials where we evaluated the initial carbon value at planting and the final value before cutting. And we have in concentration an increase of 50% of the value. So despite being a species with rapid growth, it has a benefit in carbon in the soil. It is important for us to sustain that eucalypt also has this ability, not only other conservation species. In that study, it corresponded to an increase of almost 40 tons of carbon per hectare. So with this study, we have to conclude that monitoring soil fertility is important, and we have to continue doing it in a regular basis. We have to look not only to improve our fertilization plan, but also to maintain the sustainability of the environments. It is extremely important. We also, with the study, can allow the company to have better management strategies. So we can identify the environments that are more sensitive, and where we can extract more the wood with bark or just the wood, so we can do budgets with the nutrients and evaluate this aspect. But of course we have to improve our knowledge. We have also a lack of knowledge in carbon and nitrogen dynamics. We still know few about this process. Also we have small amount of knowledge in mineral weathering, so we have to increase our studies in these areas. And also it is very important to know exactly what is the impact of each forest operation that disturb the soil. We don't have many studies of this. It is very important because we have seen here that we have the ability, eucalypt has the ability to increase carbon in soil, but we don't know what is the impact when we do a reforestation. There are some studies in Portugal, but there are few, so it is a challenge, but we should address them because it is important. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniela. Also, I believe to have good material for discussion later on. And I will have the pleasure to pass the word to Carlos Valente. He is a biologist working in Raiz. He has a PhD in forestry and natural resources engineering. He is working in Raiz now since 1998. He's a little bit less old than I am. And he's been working as a consultant and researcher with pests. He's author of many articles, and he's quite influential in this forest pest management area. I don't know if there's something good or bad, but I think it's a good thing. Carlos will make his presentation on pests and diseases affecting eucalyptus in Portugal, current situation, future prospects. Thank you, Carlos.
Hello, everyone. Well, my talk is about pests and diseases in Portugal affecting eucalyptus. And most of the organisms we call pests are Australian insects feeding exclusively on eucalyptus. These insects co-evolved in Australia with eucalyptus, so they are very well adapted to eucalyptus and they depend on eucalyptus to survive. Diseases are caused by fungi or some pathogens similar to fungi. And some of those pathogens are native to Australia, like the insects, and specific to eucalyptus, but others occur naturally in Portugal or in other regions where eucalyptus are planted. So, the pathways leading to the introduction of pests and diseases is not always known, but what we know is that most of the introductions results from the circulation of people and the international trade. For instance, wood products or live plant material. And it's important to say that the Australian pests and insects in Portugal were not introduced directly from Australia. They were first introduced in other countries where they established. Here we have two complex examples, two examples of the complex roots of one pest and one pathogen across the globe, and you can see that these are in fact complex movements of those pests and diseases. Now, presently we have in Portugal 13 Australian insects, 1 Australian mite, and dozens of pathogens. And that causes damages to eucalyptus. And if you can see this chart, this shows the history of introductions, insect introductions in Portugal across the years. This is a cumulative curve. And you can see that most of the insects were introduced here in the last 2 decades. So this is a global trending. This is what is happening worldwide. The number of pests and diseases is increasing outside Australia. So this slide is just to illustrate the diversity of feeding gills the insects we have in Portugal have. We have the foliators, we have gallmakers, there are several species of sucking insects, and we have wood borers. I don't have a slide like this for the diseases, but I can tell you that there is a high diversity of pathogens affecting eucalyptus. There are pathogens affecting the leaves of eucalyptus, others affect the stem of the eucalyptus, and others the roots. There are pathogens that are important in the field and others that are important in plant nurseries, but I will show some examples later. So let's see some pests and diseases that we have in Portugal. Here we have the longhorn borer. It's a large insect, and the larvae of this insect feeds on the stem of the eucalyptus, and they usually kill the trees. So this is a very important pest, mainly in the south of Portugal. Here we have the eucalyptus weevil, is a defoliator. Both the larvae that we see here and the adults, they eat the foliage of eucalyptus exclusively. And this is also an important pest, but this one is important in the north and in the center of the country. The bronze bug is a tiny insect that feeds on the sap of the eucalyptus. Is a sap-sucking insect, and it causes foliage discoloration and defoliation. It's also an important pest. Now the tortoise beetle is the most recent pest we have in Portugal. It's a defoliator like the eucalyptus weevil. This insect is still spreading in Portugal. It's more in the south of Portugal, but it's already causing some severe damage. The leaf spot disease It's a fungal disease caused by several species. It causes defoliation on young eucalyptus, on juvenile leaves. And in severe cases, this defoliation can reach 100% of the canopy. So it's sometimes dramatic. Phytophthora root rot, it's a recent problem in Portugal. Well, we have Phytophthora species for many decades here in Portugal, but recently we had some more new detections in Portugal. So this complex of species is causing more damage now to eucalyptus than in the past. Neopersallotiopsis disease, well, first of all, this is a very complicated name for a disease, I know, but it's a fungal disease also, and it's important mainly in plant nurseries. There are 5 new species were described as new to science just 2 years ago from Portugal and Spain, so you can see how new this problem is. So these are the most important pests and diseases in Portugal. There are more, but I think these illustrate well the diversity of problems we have here in Portugal. But now the question is, what is the importance of these pests and diseases? And I will give you just one example, with the Eucalyptus weevil. 5 years ago, in 2018, we published a paper where we assessed the economic impact of this weevil in Portugal over a 20-year period. The insect was detected in 1995. We started the study in 1996, so it was the first year with damage caused by the insect. And with this study, we concluded that almost half of the area planted with eucalyptus in Portugal was affected by the pest. So it's a lot. Wood losses were about 1 million cubic meters per year. Every year we lost, losses were about 1 million cubic meters. And in these 20 years, 650 million euros were lost. And we know that these values are underestimated because our calculations were based only on wood production, so no other ecosystem services or socioeconomic impacts were assessed. So these are underevaluated. So if we have economic impacts of the pest, we need, of course, to use tools to reduce those losses. The most used control methods are these ones. Classical biological control consists in introducing and releasing natural enemies of the pests. These are normal insects, Australian insects, specific to the target pests, and this is a very effective control method. We can use, of course, plants that are less attacked by some pests and diseases, and as the last resource, you can use also pesticides, fungicides, and insecticides. There are also other methods, but these are the most common ones. Regarding biological control in particular, because it is very important, it is very effective in forests, not only for eucalyptus, but to other plantations. Just like pests, some natural enemies arrived naturally to Portugal. And in this table, you can see a list of natural enemies that arrived in Portugal accidentally. However, most of the pests arrive without their natural enemies. So we need to import those natural enemies, we need to study them, and then to release them. Presently, there are 3 natural enemies that are authorized in Portugal for biological control of eucalyptus pests. We have 2 insects affecting the eucalyptus weevil, and we have this one here, which is a parasitoid of the egg of the bronze bug. So we have 3 insects. We are rearing and releasing those insects, and we are studying the impact of these insects on the target pests. Just one example, one of these insects is a fly called Anagonia. This fly develops inside the larvae of the Eucalyptus weevil. You can see here this fly, it's a female. She's laying her eggs inside the larva of the Eucalyptus weevil. And we started studying, looking for natural enemies of the Eucalyptus weevil in 2008. And we started releasing this natural enemy this year. So you can see that the procedures related to biological control may take a long time. One important issue in biological control is that the natural enemy that we want to introduce must be specific to the target pest. Otherwise, it can in turn, can be a pest itself. So we don't want that. And before releasing a new natural enemy, of course, we need to prove that is specific of the target pests. So here in these videos, you see how the fly Anagonia reacts to the larvae of other insects that we were testing as possible hosts. And you can see that in several cases, the flies are in panic. They don't know what to do with these strange larvae, and all they want to do is to escape. So we made a lot of studies with the specificity of this insect, and we concluded that it's safe to release this insect in Portugal, and we are doing that. So now you know the pests and diseases and the ways to control them. I will give you just an idea of the strategy that we use to deal with these problems. So early detection of new pests and diseases is an important component of this strategy. Also, we need to monitor forest health. It's very important. And sometimes when a new problem appears, there are no control methods available. So we need to develop new control methods, effective control methods to deal with these pests. And we need tools for surveillance, forecasting, and decision making. And sometimes it can be hard to use control methods against pests and diseases. And this is due to legal, bureaucratic, or certification restrictions, for example, in the import and release of exotic natural enemies for biological control, or to use pesticides mainly in the field. It's sometimes difficult. And you can have also technical limitations. For example, it can be hard to find effective natural enemies in Australia. So we need to search for them, but sometimes they are very hard to find. And it's difficult also to identify varieties of eucalyptus that are less affected by certain pests or diseases and not affected by others. But pests and diseases are important, and of course we need to guarantee the existence of effective control methods, especially when the number of new pests and pathogens are increasing worldwide, not just in Portugal, but everywhere in other countries. And climatic changes may turn some harmless species now in economically important problems. So it is necessary to develop and implement procedures that reduce the spread of these new pests between countries, so to new territories, to Portugal and to other countries. And we need to develop and implement measures to mitigate the impacts. We are talking here about control methods. We need methods to control the pests and diseases. And we need to invest in monitoring. And for example, in Portugal, we don't have a national survey of eucalyptus pests, and we need a survey of eucalyptus pests. We are We are trying to convince the forest authorities, national authorities to do that, but not yet. And it's important to invest to invest in research and development, in the bioecology of the pests, of the natural enemies, in attractants to use in traps for the main pests, for instance. And it's very important to reinforce the coordination of efforts, both national and internationally. We need companies, we need forest owners, we need universities, research centers, we need national authorities. So we need to do all of this. And if we do this right, I think it is possible to coexist with pests and diseases without unsustainable losses. So I would like to finish my presentation with the photos of the research team on pest management in Raiz, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos. The only thing I can stand is knowing that we are spreading flies on nature, because it's something that really it's I still can't live with it. Well, it's difficult to separate between the good and the bad ones when we have them around us. Okay, thank you very much for your presentations. I think they are quite interesting. I would say that they all address one problem. This is something that affects one way or the other productivity. And we just heard at the entrance that in reality we have supply problems to our mills, we have production going down in our forests, climate is changing, we have light, we are a gifted country with light, but unfortunately water is going down. We can control with fertilization, but we also need water. We need healthy plants, and healthy plants, they can survive better and they are more resilient to pests and diseases in some cases. Okay, EUCALYPTS is not a good case because it affects good areas. But anyhow, we need better conditions, and climate is not helping us. So those are challenges. I would like to just put these words together and invite you to challenge our presenters here with questions. We have 6 or 7 minutes for discussion. And I would like to open the floor for you instead of being me asking questions to my colleagues that I know for quite a long time. No, it's better to have the micro. I will give you the micro, Christina. Oops. Oops.
Thank you. Congratulations for very interesting presentations. Of course, you are my colleagues, so I cannot praise you too much. I have one question for each of you. The first question for Raul. Considering the data that you presented, is it possible to separate results from managed and non-managed areas? Where the point that I wanted to make is if we have any difference in the results when we manage and we don't manage the plantations. And obviously the final objective is to help us to mitigate this situation, okay? To Daniela, I would like to ask what are the next steps to this sort of research? If you have, you mentioned that we don't know much about the impact of forest operations on soil. Do we have any guidelines for future studies on this area? And to Carlos, I would ask if we know, or what do we know now about the genetic materials that can be more tolerant to these different pests and diseases? So talking, if we have genetic materials that are more tolerant to this, because you mentioned the approach of biological control, but you know, what do we have other solutions in terms of genetic materials?
Okay, thank you, Christina. Somebody here would like to add one question or 2 questions? Yes? And then we'll go for the answers, because we'll end up our time probably with the answers.
Hi. Thank you so much for the presentation. I just have a question for Dr. Ferreira. My question relates to what is the capacity that those eucalyptus plantations have to increase the soil organic carbon levels? I know that you mentioned, okay, the capacity that the eucalyptus plantations have to increase the soil organic carbon levels. Because if I didn't misunderstood, you mentioned 38 tons of carbon per hectare, like in the 12 years. But do you expect that in longer rotations or in the next rotation, you can have the same increase? Well, what will be an increase per year or something like that?
Thank you very much for a good question. Anybody else? No? So, sorry, let's come back to bring the micro to the speakers.
Who of you would like to start? Take the same order? Okay.
Thank you, Christina, for your question. But we don't have the separation with the areas that we studied. So we don't have the separation with about the areas with management and without it. We used to carry out this study a model of productivity that estimates productivity. So we have general information for the whole country, not this specific kind of information for each property that we studied.
So you were asking about what will we do next, the challenges. So in the last slide, I focused in three things. Mineral weathering. It is important to know how much the soil is renovating in nutrients that came from the mother parent material. And we also need to study better carbon and nitrogen cycles in soil. I would like very much to finalize my PhD in nitrogen mineralization, so I expect in a few years that we will have new data. That is important because nitrogen is very important for eucalypt. And we have a lack of knowledge, and I'm going to try to make a link to the other question. We have a lack of knowledge in the quantification of the impact of all operations that we do that affect soil. So we do a reforestation. We don't know how much it impacts on carbon storage. There are few studies in Portugal from ESA that have some numbers, but in a small scale. So we should do it in a large scale. We had that 16 trials where we had this increase in 40 tons of carbon per hectare on average. So we have some sites where the increase was higher and others that it was lower. Most of the stands had slash from previous rotation and growth during 12 years. In Portugal, we grow 3 rotations or 2 or 3 rotations before reforestation. So we could consider in average 40 plus 40 and 40 until damaging what we have created. But I don't know how much we will lose. Essentially, we will lose from the superficial soil. And what we can gain in the deeper steps, we won't lose it. But we don't have the number yet.
Well, Christina, the answer to your question is yes. We have identified already several eucalyptus materials resistant to some pests and diseases. There are some problems with that because we always would like to use Eucalyptus globus, which is the best tree for pulp production. And sometimes we don't have enough diversity in resistance or tolerance to the pests and diseases inside the species global. So we need to develop other genetic materials with other species, other eucalyptus species. And that is a problem because some of these eucalyptus species are not so good as globals. Another problem is that when we find sometimes resistant or tolerant eucalyptus, it can be very susceptible to another pests or diseases that is not present at that time, but can be a new pest or disease in the future. So sometimes we have that problem. We have a very resistant plant that a few years later is a very susceptible plant to another pest or disease.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers. Before closing our session, I was asked to send you some messages. One thing is that the other group will join us now because we'll have I don't know how to name it now, a spectacle, a presentation from a tuna. I don't know how to say tuna in English, but it will be whatever, tune? Is that so? No. Out of tune, they will sing. Not out of tune, but I hope they will speak in they will sing and dance in tune. From the University of Pharmacy here, from the students. So they will join us here immediately now. Just to also tell you that after that we'll have the dinner at 7:30, 19:30. The dinner, it will be a networking dinner at the ground floor here in the restaurant. And to everybody of you are invited. And also that tomorrow we'll start our work here at 9 o'clock, I would say sharp in the morning. It's okay, because I won't be here, so it will be sharp in the morning. And also I would like to ask you to applaud our speakers and thank them very much for the presentations today. I would like to thank also for you, for plant lovers that stayed with us and recognizing the resilience that we must have as forest researchers to take care of long-term research and with uncertainty on the results that we get, trying to overcome the problems that are going to happen in the future. Thank you very much. A gift by the president, that's good.
Para um moderador como é mais velho,